My name is Maren Solís and I am 34 years old. 8 years ago, my younger sister stood in the admissions office of the Kessler Conservatory in Portland, Oregon, handed over a portfolio that was not hers, and was accepted into the most competitive graduate ceramics program in the Pacific Northwest under a body of work I had spent 4 years building with my own 2 hands. She did not tell them she was submitting someone else's work. She told them it was hers. All 37 pieces, every photograph, every artist statement, every process journal, mine. And for 2 years, she lived inside a life that was built from my labor, my vision, and my name, a name she had borrowed without asking and spent down like borrowed money she never intended to return. What my sister did not know, what none of them knew, was that I had been documenting my work since the first year of my undergraduate program. Every fired piece, every glaze test, every sketch. Dated photographs. Signed receipts from the clay supplier. Exhibition records. A professor's handwritten notes on my development. 8 years of evidence, all organized in a flat archival box with a red lid that sat on the top shelf of my studio closet in Eugene, Oregon. Before I tell you what happened when the truth finally came out, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story earns it. Drop your city and your local time in the comments. I read every single one of them, and I love knowing where you are when you're listening to this. Now let me take you back to the beginning, to a house in Medford, Oregon, where the kitchen always smelled like cumin and burnt coffee, and where I first learned that love in my family was not distributed evenly. My mother, Dolores Solís, was born in Hermosillo, Mexico, and came to the United States at 19 with a single suitcase and a talent for making something from nothing. She raised my sister and me in a rented craftsman bungalow on the east side of Medford, 3 blocks from the railroad tracks. The house had a cracked concrete porch, a fig tree in the backyard that dropped fruit every August, and a kitchen where my mother cooked from memory. No recipes, no measurements, just her hands and whatever was in the cabinet. She worked the morning shift at a commercial laundry and the evening shift at a dry cleaner 2 days a week. She was tired in a way that lived in her shoulders, but she never let it touch her face when we were watching. My sister's name is Paloma. She is 3 years younger than me, and she came out of childhood the way certain people do, trailing light. She was small and quick and funny, the kind of girl who could walk into a room of strangers and leave with 3 new friends and someone's phone number written on her wrist. Teachers loved her. Neighbors remembered her name. My mother looked at her the way people look at something they can't believe they made. I was the quiet one. I was the one who stayed in the studio space my mother had cleared in the corner of the garage, an old workbench, a second-hand pottery wheel I'd bought with birthday money at 15, a bag of reclaimed clay that cost me $11. I was the one who came inside with gray hands and a look on my face that my mother called that faraway thing. She didn't say it unkindly. She just didn't know what to do with it. The imbalance showed up in small ways first. When Paloma wanted to take dance classes at the studio on Riverside, my mother found the money. When I asked about a ceramics workshop at the Community Arts Center, $45 for 6 sessions, my mother said she'd look into it and never did. I went anyway. I saved the money from babysitting the Reyes children down the street and I went alone. I was 16. The instructor's name was Bev Holcomb, and she was the first adult outside my family who looked at something I'd made and said, without hesitation, "This is real." I want to tell you about Bev, because she is the reason I'm sitting here at all. Bev Holcomb had been teaching ceramics in the Rogue Valley for 30 years. She was 61 when I met her, wide-shouldered and deliberate, with short silver hair and paint-stained fingers that never quite came clean. She had shown her own work in galleries in Portland and Seattle in the 80s, had a piece in the permanent collection of the Hallie Ford Museum in Salem, and had chosen, at some point in her 50s, to stop chasing exhibitions and start building other people instead. She ran the Community Arts Center ceramics program for $12 an hour. She said it was the best work she'd ever done. Bev saw something in my work that I hadn't named yet. She called it structural honesty. She said, "Maren, your pieces don't lie about what they are. They don't try to be prettier than they are. That's harder to learn than technique. Most people never learn it." She said it matter-of-factly, the way she said everything, standing at the wedging table with her arms crossed, looking at a vase-eyed throne that was slightly off-center and hadn't been corrected. I'd left it that way on purpose. She noticed. For the next 4 years, Bev was my teacher, my reference writer, my transportation to juried shows in Ashland and Grants Pass, and, eventually, my friend. When I was accepted to the University of Oregon on a partial scholarship to study art, she drove me to Eugene herself. She helped me carry boxes up 3 flights of stairs in the residence hall. Before she left, she pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand. It was her phone number and the number of a ceramics supply company in Eugene where she'd already called ahead and put my name on file for a student discount. At the bottom, in her blocky handwriting, she had written, "Document everything. Date everything. Your work is evidence of who you are." I kept that paper. I still have it. I spent 4 years at the University of Oregon building a body of work that I can only describe as the most honest thing I have ever done. My thesis series was called Load-Bearing: 12 Large-Scale Vessels Inspired by the Structural Forms of Adobe Architecture. My grandmother's house in Hermosillo, which I had visited twice as a child and which lived in my memory as a series of textures, rough plaster walls, a clay-tiled floor worn smooth in the center, a doorway with no door that framed a rectangle of white sky. The pieces were heavy and deliberate and imperfect in ways that were chosen, not accidental. My thesis advisor, Professor Daniel Wren, called the series quietly extraordinary. He submitted it to 3 juried exhibitions. 2 accepted it. 1 awarded it a purchase prize of $800, which was the first money I had ever made from my work. I photographed every piece before it left my hands. I kept the photographs in dated folders on an external hard drive and printed a set of each one, which I filed in the archival box with the red lid. I graduated in May of that year, 22 years old, with a Bachelor of Fine Arts and a debt of $31,000 in student loans. I moved into a studio apartment above a laundromat on Chambers Street in Eugene. The rent was $480 a month. The floor vibrated gently on Tuesday and Friday afternoons when the commercial dryers ran their heavy cycles. I found it oddly comforting. I worked 2 jobs. Mornings at a coffee shop on 13th Avenue where I learned to pull espresso shots with the same attention I gave to centering clay. Evenings at a frame shop where I matted and mounted other people's art and tried not to think too hard about that. On weekends and on my days off, I was in the studio space I rented for $60 a month from a sculptor named Gus who had a warehouse on the edge of the Whitaker neighborhood. I was building toward something, though I couldn't have told you exactly what. The Kessler Conservatory's graduate program in ceramics was, at that time, one of 4 programs in the country that offered a full 2-year fellowship with a studio, a materials stipend, and a guaranteed solo exhibition at the end of the residency. It accepted 8 students per year from a national applicant pool that typically ran between 400–600. I had been planning my application for 2 years. I had the work. I had the letters. I had the documentation. I submitted my application in October, the year I turned 24, and I waited. I did not tell my family I had applied. I had learned, by then, to keep my most important things quiet until they were decided. Paloma had moved to Portland the previous spring. She had a degree in communications from Southern Oregon University and a job at a marketing firm downtown. She had always been interested in art in a general, appreciative way. She liked going to galleries, liked talking about aesthetics, liked the idea of creativity. She had never, to my knowledge, thrown a pot or built a coil or pulled a handle. But she had grown up watching me do those things, and she had absorbed the vocabulary. I found out what she had done on a Tuesday in January, at 7:43 in the morning, when I was standing at the espresso machine and my phone buzzed with an email from the Kessler Conservatory. The subject line read, "Regarding your application. Fellowship status." I stepped into the back room and opened it. The email was addressed to Maren Solís. It began, "We are pleased to inform you that a candidate using your name and contact information was recently accepted to our 2018 Graduate Fellowship Program." I read that sentence 3 times. We are writing because we have received a second application submitted under the name Paloma Solís, which includes a portfolio that appears to be substantially identical to materials submitted under your name in October. We are initiating a review and ask that you contact our admissions office at your earliest convenience. I sat down on an overturned milk crate in the back of that coffee shop and I counted to 17 before I could breathe normally. I want to be precise about what my sister had done, because the details matter. Paloma had obtained, I still do not know exactly how, a copy of my digital portfolio. She had submitted it to the Kessler Conservatory in November, 6 weeks after my own application, under her name, with my photographs, my artist statement rewritten in her voice, and a set of process journal entries that she had paraphrased from my own journals, which I had left accessible on a shared family cloud account I had forgotten to close. She had been accepted in December. She had accepted the offer. She had, by January, already been assigned a studio and a faculty advisor. She had told our mother she had gotten into a graduate art program in Portland. She had not mentioned that the art was mine. I did not call Paloma that morning. I did not call my mother. I sat on that milk crate for 4 minutes, and then I went back to the espresso machine and finished my shift. When I got home that afternoon, I called the Kessler Conservatory and spoke to the director of admissions, a woman named Patricia Odom. I told her I was Maren Solís, the original applicant. I told her I had not authorized anyone to submit my portfolio on their behalf. I told her I had documentation, dated photographs, exhibition records, purchase receipts, a professor's written evaluations, that established my authorship of every piece in the portfolio. Patricia Odom was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Can you come in this week?" I drove to Portland on Thursday. I brought the archival box with the red lid. I want to pause here for a moment, because I know some of you watching right now have had someone take something from you that was yours. Not money, not property, but something that came from inside you. Something you built in the dark, when nobody was watching, when nobody believed it was worth anything yet. And I want to ask you, did you document it? Did you keep the receipts, the dates, the evidence of your own effort? If you did, type "I kept the record" in the comments. And if you didn't, if someone took something from you and you had no proof, type "I know this feeling." I want to hear from you. And if this story is resonating, please take a second to subscribe. We are just getting to the part where everything changes. Now, back to the story. Patricia Odom's office was on the third floor of the Kessler building, a converted warehouse in the Pearl District with exposed brick and tall north-facing windows that let in the flat gray light Portland does so well in January. She was a small, precise woman in her mid-50s with reading glasses on a beaded chain and the manner of someone who had handled difficult situations before and intended to handle this one with the same measured attention. I set the archival box on her desk and opened it. I had organized the contents the night before. 37 photographs of the completed thesis pieces, each labeled on the back with the date fired, the dimensions, and the exhibition history. A folder of dated purchase receipts from the Eugene Clay Company going back 4 years. A copy of the juried exhibition catalog that listed my name as the artist and reproduced 2 of the pieces. A copy of the purchase price documentation. Professor Wren's written evaluation of my thesis, dated May of the previous year, which described the load-bearing series in specific detail, the same series that appeared in the portfolio Paloma had submitted. And Bev Holcomb's original letter of recommendation for my Kessler application, which she had written in September and which described my development as an artist over 6 years, beginning when I was 16 years old. Patricia Odom looked at each document carefully. She did not rush. She made notes on a yellow legal pad. After 40 minutes, she set her pen down and looked at me over her glasses. "The portfolio your sister submitted," she said, "is your work." "Yes," I said. "And she had no authorization from you to submit it?" "No." Patricia Odom was quiet for a moment. "I want you to know that this is not the first time something like this has happened in the history of this program. It is, however, the most thoroughly documented case I have encountered." She paused. "What would you like to happen?" I had thought about this for 3 days. I had not slept much. I had sat in my apartment above the laundromat and listened to the dryers run and thought about what I actually wanted. "I want the record corrected," I said. "I want the work attributed correctly. And I want to be considered for the fellowship on my own application. Patricia Odom nodded. That is a reasonable request. We will need to conduct a formal review. Your sister will be notified and given an opportunity to respond. I want to be transparent with you about the process. I said that was fine. I left the archival box with her, along with a complete set of copies I had made the night before. I drove back to Eugene in the rain. Paloma called me that evening at 9:41. I know the time because I looked at my phone before I answered and I made a deliberate decision to pick up. Maren. Her voice was careful, the way it got when she was calculating. I got a call from the admissions office today. I know, I said. A pause. I can explain. Okay. I needed something. I needed a thing that was mine. I've been watching you have this thing your whole life, this talent, this identity, and I didn't think you were going to apply this year. You never told me you applied. I counted to 6 before I spoke. Paloma, those are my photographs. My artist statement. My process journals. My exhibition history. My work. I know. Her voice dropped. I know that. I thought maybe I could do what you do. I thought if I got in, I'd figure it out. You were going to attend a graduate ceramics program using my portfolio. I thought I could learn. You can't learn someone else's history, I said. You can't learn 37 pieces in 2 years of work. You can't learn Bev's letters or Professor Wren's notes or the exhibition in Ashland where I stood next to my work for 6 hours and talked to strangers about what it meant. You can't learn any of that. She was quiet. I'm not calling to fight, I said. I'm calling to tell you that I've submitted my documentation to the admissions office and the review is happening. I wanted you to hear it from me. I hung up. My mother called 2 days later. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message that was 3 minutes and 42 seconds long. I know because I timed it. She said she didn't understand what was happening. She said Paloma was upset. She said she hoped I wasn't going to make this into something bigger than it needed to be. She said, Mija, she's your sister. Whatever happened, she's your sister. I did not call her back that day. The Kessler Conservatory completed its review in 3 weeks. Patricia Odom called me on a Thursday afternoon and told me that Paloma's acceptance had been rescinded. The decision was documented in writing and placed in both of our files. She told me that my application was being reconsidered by the full admissions committee and that I would hear within 2 weeks. I heard in 12 days. I was accepted. I want to tell you about Bev, because this is the part of the story where she comes back in. Bev Holcomb had been diagnosed with a slow-moving form of lymphoma 3 years before all of this happened. She had not told me until the 2nd year of my undergraduate program, and even then she told me the way she told me most things. Matter-of-factly, standing at the wedging table, as though it were simply a logistical fact that needed to be conveyed. "I'm in treatment," she said. "It's manageable. I'm telling you because you deserve to know, not because I need anything from you." I called Bev the day after I was accepted to Kessler. She was at home in Medford. I could hear the television in the background, something with a laugh track. She turned it off when I started talking. When I finished telling her the whole story, Paloma, the portfolio, the review, the acceptance, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I told you to document everything." "You did," I said. "And you did." "I did." Another pause. "Maren, I'm proud of you. Not for getting in. For not flinching." She passed away 14 months later, in the spring of my first year at Kessler. She died at home, which was what she wanted. Her sister called me. I drove to Medford for the service and sat in the back of the Community Arts Center, which is where she had asked for it to be held, and I looked at the pottery wheel in the corner that she had taught me on when I was 16, and I did not cry until I was back in my car in the parking lot, and then I cried for a long time. 3 weeks after the service, I received a letter from an attorney in Medford named James Cortez. He represented Bev Holcomb's estate. The letter informed me that Bev had left me, in her will, her complete studio equipment, 2 pottery wheels, a kiln, a full set of tools, and a sum of $14,000 designated specifically for the continuation of Maren Solís's artistic practice, to be used at her discretion. The letter also included a sealed envelope with my name on it in Bev's handwriting. On the front, she had written, "Open when you need to remember why." I did not open it that day. I put it in the archival box with the red lid. I finished the Kessler Fellowship. I threw pots. I built a series of new work, larger, more complex than anything I had done before, informed by 2 years of focused studio time and the kind of silence that comes from living inside your own practice. At the end of the residency, I had a solo exhibition in the Kessler Gallery that ran for 3 weeks and sold 9 pieces. The total sales came to $22,000. I paid off the last of my student loans with part of it. I moved to Bend, Oregon. I built a studio in a converted garage behind a small house I rented on the east side of town. I started teaching weekend workshops. I began selling work through a gallery in Portland and one in Bozeman, Montana. I built a life that was recognizably mine, made from my own materials and my own effort. I did not speak to my mother or my sister for 2 years. My mother called occasionally. I answered sometimes. The conversations were careful and short, like walking across ice. She never said she was sorry for the voicemail she had left during the review, the one about not making things bigger than they needed to be. She never acknowledged what Paloma had done in any direct way. She talked about the weather in Medford. She talked about the fig tree in the backyard. I listened and said very little and told her I was fine and that I had to go. Paloma did not call. Not once in 2 years. Then, in the fall of my 33rd year, I received an email from a woman named Constance Hale. She was the director of a regional arts foundation called the Pacific Arts Legacy Initiative, based in Portland. The foundation awarded a prize every 2 years to an emerging Pacific Northwest artist working in traditional craft media. The prize included a $10,000 grant, a residency at a facility on the Oregon coast, and, most significantly, a solo exhibition at the Portland Art Museum's Craft Gallery. It was, in the world I worked in, a meaningful recognition. Constance Hale's email told me that I had been nominated for the prize by 3 separate nominators. She named them Professor Daniel Wren from the University of Oregon, the director of the Bozeman Gallery, and Patricia Odom from the Kessler Conservatory. The finalist review would take place in Portland in 6 weeks. Finalists were invited to a presentation evening where they would speak briefly about their work before the selection committee. There were 5 finalists. I wrote back and said I would attend. I did not tell my family. I had learned, by then, to keep my most important things quiet until they were decided. I found out 2 weeks before the presentation evening that Paloma had also been nominated. I found out because a mutual acquaintance from Medford mentioned it in passing. Paloma had apparently been working in ceramics for the past 2 years, had taken classes, had been building a portfolio. She had been nominated by an instructor at a community arts center in Portland. I sat with that information for 3 days. Then I called Patricia Odom. I know, Patricia said, before I'd finished explaining. I received the nominee list last week. I want you to know that I submitted a formal letter to Constance Hale's office documenting the 2018 review. The foundation has it. It's part of the record. Thank you, I said. Maren. Your work speaks for itself. It has always spoken for itself. Go to Portland and let it speak. I want to pause here again, because I think some of you know exactly what it feels like to have to walk into a room where the person who hurt you is also in the room, and to have to be composed, to have to be professional, to have to let your work do the talking when every part of you wants to say something out loud. If you know that feeling, type "I've been in that room" in the comments. And if you've been watching this long and you haven't subscribed yet, this is the moment. Hit subscribe. Because what happened in Portland, what happened in that room, is the part one have been building toward this entire time. Now, back to the story. The Pacific Arts Legacy Initiative presentation evening was held at a private event space in the Pearl District, 3 blocks from the Kessler Conservatory building where I had sat across from Patricia Odom 6 years earlier with a red-lidded box on the desk between us. The room held approximately 60 people, selection committee members, foundation board members, nominators, guests of the finalists. The walls were hung with photographs of each finalist's work, printed large and mounted on foam board. I arrived at 6:45, 15 minutes before the program began. I wore a dark green dress I had bought the previous spring, and my hair was pulled back the way I wore it in the studio. I carried a canvas tote with a copy of my artist statement and a small portfolio of process photographs, though I did not expect to need them. My work was on the wall to the left of the entrance. 6 photographs, each piece labeled with its title, its dimensions, its materials, and the year it was made. The earliest was from 2016, the year I was 22 and living above the laundromat. The most recent was from the previous summer. Looking at them in sequence, you could see exactly how the work had developed. The same structural honesty Bev had named, deepened and expanded over 8 years. Paloma's photographs were on the opposite wall. Her work was technically competent. The forms were clean. The glazes were careful. It was the work of someone who had learned the craft in the past 2 years and was working hard and sincerely. It was not the work of someone who had been doing this since they were 15. I saw her across the room at 7:07. She was wearing a cream-colored blouse and dark trousers, and she was standing with her nominating instructor, a young man with a beard who was gesturing toward her photographs with evident pride. She saw me at the same moment I saw her. We looked at each other for approximately 4 seconds. She did not come over. I did not go to her. My mother was not in the room. I had not expected her to be. The program began at 7:30. Constance Hale, a tall woman in her 60s with close-cropped white hair and a rust-colored blazer, welcomed the room and explained the selection process. Each finalist would speak for 5 minutes about their practice and the work represented in the photographs. The committee would deliberate the following day and announce the award recipient at a public event the following week. I was third. I walked to the front of the room and I spoke about the load-bearing series and what came after it. I talked about the adobe walls in my grandmother's house in Hermosillo. I talked about structural honesty. I talked about what it means to make something that does not lie about what it is. I spoke for 4 minutes and 58 seconds. My voice did not waver. Paloma was fifth. She spoke clearly and with evident feeling about learning to work with clay, about what the process had taught her about patience and attention. She was genuine. I believed her. I also knew that she had been doing this for 2 years and I had been doing it for 18, and that the photographs on the wall behind her, whatever their merits, could not carry the weight of a history they did not have. After the presentations, there was a reception. I stood near my photographs and spoke with several committee members who asked detailed questions about my process. At one point, Patricia Odom appeared at my elbow. She had been invited as a nominator. She did not say anything. She just stood beside me for a moment, looking at the photographs, and then she moved on. That was enough. At 8:47, Paloma crossed the room and stood in front of me. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Your work is extraordinary." I looked at her. "Thank you." "I mean it." She held my gaze. "I've been trying to learn what you know." "I don't know it yet. I might not ever know it. But I've been trying to learn it honestly, this time." I counted to 4. "I know," I said. "I can see it in the photographs." She looked down briefly. "I've wanted to call you. For 2 years." I didn't know what to say. "You could have said you were sorry." "I am sorry." She looked up. "I know that doesn't fix anything." "No," I said. It doesn't. But it's a start. We stood there for a moment, and then someone from the committee approached me with a question about the firing temperatures I used, and Paloma stepped back and let the conversation happen. I drove home to Bend that night. The road through the Cascades was dark and the stars were clear above the tree line, and I thought about what Bev had said the last time I'd seen her in person, 3 months before she died. We had been sitting in her kitchen in Medford, drinking tea, and she had looked at me over her mug and said, "The work will outlast the argument. It always does. Just keep making the work." The Pacific Arts Legacy Initiative announced its award recipient on a Tuesday morning, 8 days after the presentation evening. I was in my studio when my phone rang. It was Constance Hale. She told me that the selection committee had voted unanimously. She told me the grant would be transferred to my account within 30 days. She told me the Portland Art Museum exhibition was scheduled for the following spring. I thanked her. I hung up. I sat down on the stool next to my wheel and I looked at my hands for a long time. Then I opened the archival box with the red lid and took out Bev's sealed letter. I had carried it for 14 months without opening it. I opened it now. The letter was 2 pages, handwritten in her blocky script on plain white paper. She talked about the first time she had seen my work, when I was 16, standing at the wedging table in the Community Arts Center with gray hands and that faraway look. She talked about what she had recognized in it. She said, "You have never made work to impress anyone. You have made it because it is the truest thing you know how to do. That is rarer than talent. That is character." At the bottom of the second page, she had written, "The work is the evidence. It always was. I love you, kid. Keep the record." I did not cry. I noticed that. My hands were still and my breathing was even, and I sat in my studio in the early morning light and felt something that I can only describe as the particular peace that comes when a long-held truth finally lands where it belongs. The consequences of the 2018 review had played out quietly over the years, the way real consequences usually do. The Kessler Conservatory had updated its submission protocols to require additional verification of portfolio authorship. I learned this from Patricia Odom 2 years after the fact, mentioned in passing during a phone call about something else. Paloma had not been able to apply to any other graduate program in ceramics that year. The rescission was on her record. She had, apparently, taken that as a reason to begin again honestly, which I found I could respect even when I could not yet forgive. My mother called me the week after the award was announced. She had seen a mention of it in a regional arts newsletter that a neighbor had forwarded to her. She said she was proud of me. She said it in a way that was real, not performative. I could hear the difference after 34 years. She also said, quietly, near the end of the call, "I should have done more, back then. When it happened. I should have said more." I let that sit for a moment. "Yes," I said. "You should have." She didn't argue. She just said, "I know." That was not an absolution. It was not a restoration of everything that had been lost. But it was honest, And honesty from my mother was not something I had ever taken for granted, and I was not going to start now. I told her about Bev's letter. I read her the last line, "The work is the evidence." It always was. Keep the record. My mother was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "She sounds like she was a good woman." "She was the best I've known," I said. The Portland Art Museum exhibition opened on a Thursday evening in April, the spring I turned 35. The gallery held 42 pieces, spanning 12 years of work. The earliest piece was a small vessel I had thrown at 18, slightly off-center, left that way on purpose. The most recent was a large floor piece from the previous winter, the most complex thing I had ever made. My mother came. She drove up from Medford with my Aunt Rosa, who I had not seen in 6 years. They stood in front of the photographs for a long time, and my mother touched the wall next to one of the prints. Not the print itself, just the wall beside it, and I understood that as the closest she could come to touching the thing she had not known how to see when I was young. Paloma did not come to the opening. She sent a card. It was a plain white card with my name on the front in her handwriting. Inside, she had written, "I'm working on something honest. I hope you'll see it someday." I put the card in the archival box with the red lid. If you are watching this right now and you have made something, anything, with your own hands, your own mind, your own labor, and someone has tried to take credit for it, or diminish it, or pretend it was theirs, I want you to hear this: the work is the evidence. Document it. Date it. Keep the record. Not because you are planning a confrontation. Not because you want revenge. But because your effort deserves a witness, and sometimes you have to be your own. The truth does not need to be loud. It just needs to be documented. And when the moment comes, and it will come, you open the box and you let the record speak. I am 34 years old. I have a studio in Bend, Oregon, with 2 pottery wheels and a kiln that Bev left me, and a shelf of work that is mine from the first mark to the last firing. I have a life that was built honestly, from the ground up, in the dark, when nobody was watching. I would not trade it for anything. If this story resonated with you, if you have ever had to prove that something was yours, or watched someone take credit for your effort, or sat quietly in a room where the truth was being decided, I hope you felt a little less alone tonight. Drop a comment and tell me what you're thinking. Hit subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this one. And share this with someone who needs to remember that the quiet ones keep the best records. I'll see you in the next one.